I invite you to stand. All things are bright and beautiful. All things retching and hard. You and I, neighbors, strangers, friends, and enemies. broken off every chain. You have set me free. You've lifted my heavy weight. You have set me free. You've broken off. You've broken off every chain. You have set me free. You lifted my heavy weight. You have set me free. And thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord. You have set me free. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord. You have set me free. You have set me free. You've broken off. You opened my prison door. You have set me free. My sin will hold me no more. You have set me free. You've opened my prison door. You've opened my prison door. You have set me free. My sin will hold me no more. You have set me free. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord. You have set me free. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord. You have set me free. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord. You have set me free. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord. You have set me free. Okay, I think you guys can do this part. It goes like this. Sing with me. Do, 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 do. You have set me free. Do, 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 do. You have set me free. One more time. Do, 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 do. You have set me free. Do, 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 do. You have set me free.
Do 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 baby shark. Do, do, do. We can never sing do do do's anymore.
No, we can't. Well, good morning. Welcome to church. My name's Tim. This is Jesse. We kind of familiar faces. We're giving Lane a break this week. It's really good to be with you this morning. Thank you for having us. We enter into a time of worship. We're going to sing about God's greatness, how He's worthy and deserving of all praise, and how He's our hope. And that's something that can speak to all of us, whether we've been with God for 5 minutes or 50 years. We sing these songs because they go beyond the world we live in. They go beyond the things that we can see and touch. That's what faith is about. It is our living hope. The song is called Living. that lay between us. How high the mountain I could not climb. In desperation, I turned to heaven and spoke your name into the night. Through the darkness, your loving kindness tore through the shadows of my soul. The work is finished, the end is written. Jesus Christ, my living hope. Could imagine so great a mercy. What heart could fathom such boundless grace? The God of ages stepped down from glory to wear my sin and bear my shame. The cross is spoken, I am forgiven. The King of Kings calls me his own. Beautiful Savior, I'm yours forever. Jesus Christ, my living hope. Hallelujah, praise the one who set me free. Hallelujah, death has lost its grip on me. You have broken every chain. There's salvation in your name, Jesus Christ, my living hope. Hallelujah, praise the one who set me free. Hallelujah, death has lost its grip on me. You have broken every chain. There's salvation in your name, Jesus Christ, my living hope. Then came the morning that sealed the promise. Your buried body began to breathe. Out in the silence, the roaring lion declared the grave has no claim on me. Came the morning that sealed the promise. Your buried body began to breathe. Out of the silence, the roaring lion declared the grave has no claim on me. Declare the grave has no claim on me. Hallelujah, praise the one who set me free. Hallelujah, death has lost its victory. You have broken every chain. There's worthy of every song we could ever sing, worthy of all the praise we could ever bring, worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever take. We live for you. We live for you. Holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder. Show me who you are and fill me with your love and lead me to your love to those around me. Worthy of every song we could ever sing, worthy of all the praise we could ever bring, worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. We live for you. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Oh, we live for you. Holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder. Show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. Holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder. Show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. And I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation. I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken. I will build my life upon your will not be shaken. For we stand in your presence. We stand in your hope, the hope created by you, the hope sent to save a dying people. Separated by our sin, God, we acknowledge that we need the sacrifice. We acknowledge you sent your one and only Son to be that sacrifice. The gift given to us. God, and it's in this place that we say that you're worthy. You're a holy God. You're bigger than we understand, bigger than we can know. So God, in our faith, we reach out and we say, you are our hope. You are our only hope. We trust that you've got this whole thing in your hands. And life is going to come and life's going to be hard. But you still got it all in your hands, God. Thank you, God. God, we've come to gather under your roof in this sanctuary. As one voice, we say to you, God, we're here for you. God, at your feet, we lay our lives. The things we are excited about, the things we're joyous about, the things we're celebrating, the change of seasons. We think about our sons and daughters graduating and the changes that are coming and the accomplishments that have been made. We lay these celebrations at your feet, God. God, there's some of us with heavy hearts, and we've got some things to lay at your feet. Things we've become victims of. God, we lay them at your feet. Not to celebrate them, but to give them away. And God, we do want to give them away. This isn't a place where we share these hard things and pick them up and take them back with us. But God, we lay them at your feet and we say, you're big enough to carry them. We know that you'll walk with us. May those that need that this morning, God, be filled with hope. God, as we celebrate Memorial Day weekend, we think of the saints that have gone before us. We celebrate them. We celebrate them this morning, God. Thank you for this peaceful place. Thank you for these four walls where we can express you in freedom. And we can come as ourselves. And we don't need to change. We don't need to be anything. We're just welcome because we come in your name. Thank you for that, God. It doesn't matter if we're divorced or not. If we've been through that, you accept us. Pray for Pastor Dana. May you use him as your instrument. May his words this morning be from you and encourage us this morning, God. And now we pray as the Lord taught us to pray, the Lord's Prayer. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For yours is the kingdom, and the power and the glory forever. Amen. Thank you. You may be seated.
If we've never met before, my name is Dana Hicks, and I'm part of Cross Point United Methodist Church and endeavoring in some new projects with the Cathedral of the Rockies, which I'll talk about in just a minute. But before we get into the message this morning, we are fortunate enough to have a baptism that we're going to do. And so I'd invite the Miles family to come if you could. It's not every day that you get a chance to be a part of a miracle, and this is part of Reagan's story, who we're going to be baptizing this morning. Reagan was born very, very small, and she is a trooper and a fighter, and much to be proud of. I'm going to give this candle to somebody who isn't holding a child, because I think that might be the safest thing. Excuse me, sorry. Still getting used to this thing. We're here to praise the life of Reagan, our young friend, who in such a short time has brought us so much joy. Through Reagan, we've experienced birth again in new and more conscious way. God has created the world again, opening us up to wonder and possibility that we had forgotten. We live not for ourselves alone, but toward God and for each other. Our lives are bound in a covenant of love with Reagan. And so this morning we will baptize Reagan with our desire to show her a way of life that naturally displays love and respect and justice. And we baptize her with our intention to witness the unfolding of God's creation as she grows and changes. And we're going to baptize her with our desire to be in God's presence as we are in her presence. We will baptize her with our desire to see her grow in spiritual maturity and wisdom and soulful service to others, following in the spiritual footsteps of Christ. Each of us here today has a unique role in raising this beautiful child. Daniel and Rebecca, do you, her parents, commit yourselves to raising her in a manner that inspires faithfulness and compassion and spiritual growth? If say, we do. Do you, all of you gathered here, friends and family of Reagan, commit yourselves to being a faithful community that will guide and support her through her life? If so, say, we do. This water of the baptismal font represents the far-flung cultural well springs that will nourish Reagan throughout her life. To paraphrase the scriptures, the Holy Spirit will come upon her, and the power of the Most High will overshadow her, and the child will be called holy, a child of God. Reagan Miles, I baptize you in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. I present to you today, Reagan, God's gift to Daniel and Rebecca, to her family, and to all of us. Amen. I'll give this to somebody else who's not holding so much. That's from the United Methodist Women, and this is a certificate of baptism as well. So thanks so much for sharing your daughter in this moment with us today. Well, summer is here, and that means for many of us travel and busyness, and I know us Idahoans, I love to camp this time of year, and many of you, as a pastor, I've noticed some of you just disappear sometimes in the summer, and I wonder what happened to you and worry about you a bit. Some of it has to do with kids' sports. I know sometimes my son played baseball, and it was like every weekend there was something going on with that. Some of you have jobs that require you to work on Sunday mornings, and wherever you may find yourself in any of those things this summer, let me throw out a suggestion to you. Starting next Sunday, here in the Emmaus Center, I'm going to be overseeing a new service for the Cathedral of the Rockies, a 5 p.m. service. And if for whatever reason Sunday mornings are difficult for you, maybe just stay out late on Saturday, I don't know. But whatever it might be, we would love to have you join us at 5 p.m. here in the Emmaus Center. A little bit different format. We'll be around tables instead of sitting in rows, but it's going to be a lot of fun. And I really hope you can join us at some point this summer, and hopefully that'll work into your routine maybe a little bit better. Well, we've been in a conversation over the last few weeks. We're calling it clobber passages. And the idea is more or less that some religious folks have taken delight in using parts of the Bible to beat other people up with it. And they use the Bible like a weapon instead of a Band-Aid. And if you've ever been beaten up by religious folks with the Bible, I hope these weeks have been maybe helpful for you, help you to think through some of your own experiences, and maybe even a little bit healing for you. And so this morning we're going to talk about a really sensitive subject, something that's experience that all of us have encountered in some way or another in our lives. But I want to start with a little thought experiment with you to help us get kind of to frame our minds in this. If you wanted to parachute out of an airplane, skydive out of an airplane, and you showed up at the airport where they get the plane ready, and the person who's in charge of the whole thing says to you, now, our regular guy who packs the parachutes is on vacation, and we got some other clown that's doing it, I'm not sure. There's about a 50-50 chance this chute will open, so good luck to you. Would you get on the plane and jump? Probably not. If you were at a sushi restaurant and the waiter said to you, I'm not so sure about this fish. It's been around for a while, and probably about a 50-50 chance that you'll really, really regret this later. Would you eat it? Probably not. If you were getting on an airplane and they said to you, having a little mechanical trouble, got about a 50-50 shot of landing this thing okay, but you probably wouldn't get on. I think you kind of know where I'm going with this, right? Every year, 2.5 million people in our country decide to get married. And in those 2.5 million people, statistically, the odds are roughly about 50-50 chance of somehow that making it. But we still keep doing it. We still keep rolling the dice, believing that somehow this isn't going to be us, that somehow the laws of averages don't apply to me, that this isn't going to happen to us, that somehow we'll be the ones to beat the odds. Well, this isn't a new thing, by the way. Divorce is not a new thing. It's been around since the very ancient world. And in fact, this morning we're going to look at some of Jesus' teachings on divorce. And some people have used Jesus' teaching on divorce to clobber other people. But I think what you'll discover this morning is that maybe it isn't exactly what it seems at first glance. So I'm going to kind of walk through a little bit of ancient Near Eastern history, a little bit of the Old Testament, and then a little bit about background of what's going on in Jesus' life before we actually get to Jesus' teaching. So I'm going to kind of walk through some little thicker stuff, so you'll have to bear with me a little bit. I apologize in advance if you were hoping not to think this morning, but bear with me. Way back in the Old Testament world, in the ancient world, before the Old Testament, before the Hebrew Scriptures, the world was governed, and you may remember this from your high school days, by what was called the Hammurabi Code. And this was a way of seeing life in the ancient world and a way of guiding ethics in the ancient world. And the Hammurabi Code said this: if you're a wife, your husband could divorce you at any time for any reason just by walking out of the house. You would get stuck with the kids and no money, and more than likely not a good opportunity to really provide for yourself or for your kids. And if by chance you were able to survive that, and your children would grow up and they would begin to work for other people and maybe bring in a little bit of money, your ex-husband could show up at any time, reclaim you, reclaim the kids, reclaim all the money that you earned, and resume as if life was normal. So in the ancient world, if you were a woman and you were divorced and your husband left you, even though technically you could remarry, the reality was that there wasn't anybody really interested in doing that. Because if your husband, number one, returned, and he could demand that you come back to him, and the second husband would lose everything. So divorce made women in the ancient world very, very vulnerable. It was really a tragic sort of situation. Divorce involved a lot of contention around money and finances. And fortunately, in our day, people are more mature when they go through a divorce, and they hardly ever fight about money. But back then they did, so you just have to kind of use your imagination. So the law of Moses comes around, and it sort of stands in contrast to this Hammurabi Code. The law of Moses comes, and it begins to think of women in a very different sort of way. in a very progressive way, a radical sort of way. And in Deuteronomy 24, the law of Moses says these words, "Suppose a man marries a woman, but she does not please him. Having discovered something wrong with her, he writes a letter of divorce, hands it to her, and sends her away from the house." Hang on to that phrase, letter of divorce. We'll come back to that. And then later, in another place, in Exodus 21, addresses another question. This is a question that comes up. What happens if a man takes a second wife, and it's designed to protect the interests of the first wife? And it says this, Exodus 21, "If a man who has married a slave wife takes another wife for himself, he must not neglect the rights of the first wife to food, to clothing, and sexual intimacy. If he fails in any of these three obligations, she may leave as a free woman without making any payment." Okay, so there's kind of a lot of cultural stuff going on here. But in this case, here's what's happening. The husband takes a new wife, and as human nature is, the new wife tends to get all the good stuff, and the second wife doesn't. So the law says this: when the husband marries the first wife, he made a vow, he made a promise to support first, through food and clothing, to love, and to provide. And if he breaks that vow, then the first wife is free to leave, free to get a divorce, free to get a certificate in order to remarry. The certificate, this thing in writing, was a way of protecting the woman because it meant that the first husband could never come back and say, "Oh, I want her back now that she's made some money," or something like that. Now, I know in our modern, to our 2019 ears, we hear this talk about how women are this sort of sense of possession, and it's pretty disgusting, really. I mean, let's be honest. But this was the ancient world, and what I hope you hear as we kind of talk about this background is the radical way in which the Hebrew Scriptures begin to empower women for the very first time. And even though we may see it as very oppressive, at that time, this was so radical and so progressive that women actually had rights. So this Hebrew Scriptures then, rabbis, teachers of the Hebrew law, they would get together and they loved to talk about this, and they would argue back and forth, and they would debate about what exactly this means. But they agreed on three things: that marriage involved three primary promises. They took these two passages in Deuteronomy 24 and Exodus 11, and they said marriage involves three promises. First, to be faithful. Second, to provide, physical well-being, food, clothes, that sort of thing. And then third, to love. Sexual intimacy, affection, those sorts of things. And they said when one of those vows are broken, the victim of the broken vow has a right to get divorced, male or female. Women had a right to divorce. And that would include the right to be remarried. There was no such thing in Judaism as a divorce that did not include the right to remarry. That was sort of the idea behind the certificate, so that you could remarry. So rabbis, again, they would love to debate, and they would debate about, all kinds of what we would consider kind of trivial sorts of things, and they would debate over what constituted the breaking of these vows. At what point did you actually break the vow, right? How much food is not providing enough food? What about clothing? How many new outfits does she get, right? How many pairs of shoes is enough, right? What about conjugal love? They actually debated this stuff, right? This is what I'm not making this up, this is for reals. This is what they said. The husband had to offer to be physically intimate with his wife at least 3 times a week, or she had the right to divorce him. But of course, they had exceptions because they would talk about that. They said, well, what about a donkey driver who was away for a time? And they said, well, just once a week for a donkey driver, kind of like a long haul truck driver, And then they said, well, what if they were unemployed though, And what they decided was this: if a husband is unemployed, he had to make the offer of physical intimacy every night, 7 nights a week, or his wife could divorce him. Some people at this point speculate that a lot of rabbis were unemployed, but that we don't know. We don't know for sure. So there's lots of different grounds for divorce that could happen, for things like abandonment or abuse. So abandonment would simply be the extreme example of breaking the vow to provide. Abuse would be the extreme form of breaking the vow to love. And so nobody thought divorce was a good idea. Nobody thought it was a wonderful thing, but it was a way of preventing a worse injustice and suffering when vows were in fact broken. So this is sort of the Hebrew Scriptures. This is what's going on with the Bible Jesus read and some of the conversations that were going on in Jesus' day when he shows up on the scene. But into that scene in Jesus' day, there was two rabbis that were kind of real popular, and people, kind of two schools of thought, if you were. And people would follow these two famous rabbis. In Jesus' day, the two schools were the Hillel and the Shammai rabbis. So the Hillel school of thought believed in what they called any cause divorce. So Rabbi Hillel looked at Deuteronomy 24, and he thought about it and said that Deuteronomy 24 said that a man could divorce his wife for two reasons: for sexual immorality or any cause. Any cause. And so Hillel, of course, was a man, and he concluded that any cause divorce would be available to one gender. Anybody want to guess what gender that was? Okay, yeah, you're following with me. Good, good. So any cause divorce, Hillel said, covered just about any fault you could conceive of. And this is for real. I'm not making this up. He said if a wife spoiled her husband's dinner, he could file for divorce. If she walked around with her hair unbound, her husband could divorce her because that was considered improper. If she argued in a voice loud enough to be heard in the next house, that was grounds for divorce. If she rented 2 consecutive chick flicks at Red Box, he could divorce her. I made up that last one, but it seems to make sense in the context here. But as you can imagine, this became a very popular form of divorce in Jesus' day, right? So this any cause sort of divorce, right? And so that was the Hillel school of thought. The Shammai school, Rabbi Shammai, had a whole different way of sort of seeing this. He believed divorce was only for breaking those 3 primary promises. He said, now, Deuteronomy 24 doesn't refer to only divorce being allowed for sexual immorality, not any cause. So he says, you take Exodus 21 and you add it with Deuteronomy 24, and there's three reasons you could get divorced. When a vow of love was broken, when someone cheated, or when the vow of provision was broken. Not just for any old reason. So in Jesus' day, this was the big debate of the day that people would wonder about. Are you a Hillel guy or a Shammai guy, right? And everybody wanted to know where all the rabbis stood on the subject. In the same way in our day, like we may ask politicians, where do you stand on Medicare for all, or where do you stand on global warming, or whatever it might be. We want to know where they stand on these important issues. And so that's sort of the backdrop that comes to this text in Matthew 19. It says these words, some Pharisees came to test him, meaning Jesus, and they asked, is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any and every reason? Now, they are not asking Jesus what some people who like to clobber others have largely understood this question to be. They are not asking, Rabbi, is divorce against the law? They're not asking that. Divorce was in Moses' law, and no rabbi would have ever said, is it lawful for us to follow Moses' law? It was the law. They just did it. What they're asking is this, Jesus, how do you interpret Deuteronomy 24? Are you a Hillel guy? Or are you a Shammai guy? This is the big issue. We want to know which side do you fall on that? And so this is what Matthew 19 records. Haven't you read, he, meaning Jesus, replied, that at the beginning the Creator made them male and female and said, for this reason a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife. And the two will become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore what God has joined together, let no one separate. Why then, they asked, did Moses command that a man give his wife a special certificate of divorce and send her away? Jesus replied, Moses permitted you to divorce your wives because your hearts were hard. But it was not this way from the beginning. I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife except for sexual immorality and marries another woman commits adultery. So Jesus is saying, if you do this any cause kind of divorce like Rabbi Hillel is endorsing, you're wrong. You're wrong. And if you do this any cause kind of divorce and remarry, which would have been the expectation in that culture, it would be adultery, Jesus says. Because the only grounds Jesus mentions here is sexual immorality. Some people have thought that the New Testament position is that the only biblical grounds for divorce, or for divorce and remarriage, is adultery. And this has led, I think, in my opinion, to a lot of anguish and a lot of heartbreak and confusion and tragedy. I've heard things like this said. You mean if my husband beats me, beats my children, is addicted to drugs and alcohol, steals the money, gambles it away, tries to kill me, I have to stay married to him, but if he strays one time sexually, I'm good to go. It makes no sense. And people have wrongly clobbered other people with the Bible on this issue. But this is not what Jesus is saying. Jesus is not talking about the entire framework of marriage and divorce here. He's addressing a very specific debate in this day, the Hillel Shammai debate. And any reader in that day would have recognized it. A similar situation in our day would be if someone said, do you think it's okay for a 16-year-old to drink? We would naturally just fill in the blank and say what that means, drink alcohol, because we understand what the question means. First century readers understood the debate. What's your interpretation of Deuteronomy 24, Jesus? And Jesus says, I'm a Shammai guy. What can I say? I'm against Hillel. I'm against the any cause divorce. This is what he's saying. For some reason, he has a Brooklyn accent. I'm not sure why. And so Jesus believes that when any one of these three promises of marriage are broken, to be faithful, to provide, and to love, and, Jesus adds, there is hard-heartedness, then divorce may well be the only option. So with that background, let me just throw this out to you, because I think this might be an important caveat to add. If you are in an abusive situation, if you or your children are in danger, then you need to get out. Get safe. And too often churches have not been very clear about this. Get safe. Do not think that obedience to God means remaining in a situation where you or your children's lives are in danger. That is not biblical, it's not loving, it's not wise, and it's not the teaching of Jesus here. So there's a lot that we've covered in a really short period of time. And we could have talked for quite a long time about all the nuance of what's going on and marriage and divorce. This is such a huge topic. But let me just wrap up with a couple of pastoral words if I could. My guess is that everyone in this room has been touched by this subject in some way or another. Maybe you grew up in a home in which your parents got divorced or were divorced, and you still feel the sadness over that. Maybe you're here today and you're struggling in a marriage. And you hear Jesus talk about being hard-hearted, and you think, yeah, I know what that's like, for sure. Or maybe you've been through a divorce, been through the pain of divorce. And you've been to a church where they've given a message that divorce is somehow the unforgivable sin, or made you feel like you were damaged goods or something like that. And sometimes church people have added to the pain of a difficult situation by clobbering others with shame. And if that's your case this morning, I'm sorry that that's happened to you. There's a lot of nuance of what's going on in every one of our hearts here this morning as we think about this subject. But there may be some of you that think, I need to really work through this more emotionally and unpack this more emotionally. If that's where you're at, we partner with the Methodist Counseling Center here in Boise, and you can get information on how to contact them at the information booth out here on your way out. And that might be a good next step for you to continue to kind of work through what all this means. And let me add one other caveat to this as well. Some of you are here and you're listening to this message and you're feeling a little smug because marriage seems kind of easy to you, right? And you think, man, if those people just worked a little harder, maybe they wouldn't be having all this trouble, right? And if you've avoided divorce in your life, I really hope it's because you've worked hard at your marriage and you've stuck to it through difficult times and misunderstandings and learned to forgive and trust again. But if your marriage is going really well, maybe it's because you're a morally superior person. That could be it. That might be the explanation. But maybe, hear me out, maybe it's because your dysfunction and your spouse's dysfunction happen to lead to massive conflict avoidance, and that's why you're so happy. That could be an option as well. So Jesus kind of says this little phrase in passing that I think is that we could really dwell on for a long time, but I just want to end up by just kind of reflecting on this phrase with you a little bit. He talks about the two shall become one flesh. And I think what Jesus means here is more than just sexual intimacy. It's this oneness of heart, this oneness of spirit, this oneness of mind and body, a common loyalty, a common commitment, a resolve to do life together. In fact, marriage, when it's good, can be so breathtakingly good that century after century upon century, a large share of the songs that get sung and the books that get written are largely about this endless aching longing that we have for oneness. For oneness. And every time you hear a romantic song or see a marriage proposal on your Facebook feed or go to a wedding or see a romantic comedy, it resonates deep in your soul because you have this longing deep in your soul for oneness. And that's why those of us who got a 50-50 shot at success, I rolled the dice. You probably did too, because the payoff's so big when it's right. When it's good, it's really good. And weddings remind us that in this dark and broken world, that love still wins. And there's nothing rational at all about standing in front of a group of people and committing the rest of your life away for better, for worse, for richer, for poor, in sickness and in health. But we do it all the time because the payoff is so good when it's good. And so, it's no wonder that when God wanted a picture of his desire for us as a people, his desire for oneness with his people, the picture he uses to talk about it is marriage. And marriage becomes this sort of sacrament, a symbol, a pointing to something bigger than us, that we are loved in spite of our own dysfunction, that we are loved unconditionally as we are and not as we should be, that God's love for you is huge and irrational and rich and full of life and beauty and intimacy. And so, no matter where divorce has hurt you, whether it's an old pain from childhood or as fresh a wound as this weekend, may you have the courage to reach out to others that can help you on this journey. May you find comfort in the irrationality of God's love for you. May you have the hope to continue, despite obstacles, to fight and strive for oneness. For oneness. God, we come to this place today recognizing that there's so many in this room that have been touched by this issue. And I know just even bringing up the subject for some is just, they feel it deep in their bones. And for those who are hurting this morning, God, I lift them up to you and particularly and ask that your presence would be with them, your strength would be with them, that they would be aware of your healing that could be in their life. For those of us who've been clobbered by religious folks with this passage, we pray for them specifically. Thank you for your love and your grace and the compassion that you show to us. And for all of us as we go from this place, may we be conduits of your love and your grace and your mercy to everyone we come in contact with. In the name of your Son, Jesus, we pray these things. Amen. Thank you. We're going to receive an offering. I'm going to clap for that one too. We're going to receive an offering, and this is a way of giving back to God a little of what he's given to us, and recognizing that our lives are lives of generosity, and that generosity makes the world a better place, and that we get to participate in the generous love that God has given to us. I invite the ushers to come as we receive that, and I think you guys are going to play something, aren't you? All right, good.
mercy and compassion, our hearts say yes. Lord, come take control in us, in us. Come have your way, oh Lord, in us, your way. In us, come from your heart, oh Lord, in us, Jesus, your heart. Move us, lead us, send us, release us to the broken, to the hungry, to the outcast, to the weary. Move us, lead us, send us, release us to the broken, to the hungry, to the outcast, to the weary. Ooh. Hearts
Sorry.
say yes.
Lord, come take control in us, come have your way, oh Lord, in us, your way. In us, come from your heart, oh Lord, in us, Jesus, your heart.
Wanna love the things you love, wanna hate the things you hate. As your heart is formed inside us, may we learn to walk in grace and extend a hand of mercy, set the captives free, giving freedom to the prisoner, bringing hope the blind can see. Mercy triumphs over judgment. Mercy triumphs over judgment. Sing it again. Mercy triumphs over judgment. Mercy triumphs over judgment. We say yes, Lord. We say yes, Lord. We say yes, Lord. We say yes. We say yes. We say yes, Lord. We say yes, Lord. We say yes, Lord. We say
For the generosity of these people, for the things that we're able to do in our community and across the world. And as we go from this place, may we be conduits of your love and your mercy. May we be people who provide compassion to those who have gone through difficult sorts of things. May we not be the clobberers. May we be the Band-Aids. We ask this in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen. Am I supposed to sing or am I supposed to do benediction? Okay. Tim and I are new at this, can you tell? Listen to this promise Jesus Christ makes and receive this as the benediction. He will never abandon us as orphans. He will come to us, and although the world will not be able to see him, he will never vanish from our sight. And since he lives, so we also will live. So go from here in the comfort that we do not go alone. The power and the presence of God goes with us. Let us go reflecting that love and that grace. We receive this to serve all that we meet this week. In the name of the loving Father, the resurrected Son, and the presence of the Holy Spirit. God bless you and have a fantastic week. Hey, Tim.